Everybody, kia ora tātou, kia ora whānau. Welcome to this very special evening of green drinks. We've got the privilege tonight to have almost all mayoral candidates here to introduce themselves and also to talk about some questions around environmental issues, so we get a feeling for their opinions and attitudes. Before we dive into the agenda, just the usual bit of housekeeping. Toilets in the foyer on my left, brand new, nicely renovated. Emergency exits, the way you came in, one here, one there. They're open, I checked. Then phone, please, I guess your followers can do without a couple of hours, so turn them off or put them at least on silent. And microphone, well, there isn't one, so please speak up like I do so that even people at the back of the room can still hear you. That goes, of course, for the candidates as much as for people asking questions. Now, let's go to the agenda. The agenda has been set up so that we obviously get to hear from everyone, but also in a way that we're out of here in time for dinner. So, first of all, each candidate will get 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and after that, we're going to pose them a set of questions. Again, this is all time constrained, and then after that, there'll be the floor open for some questions. Now, I realize that we're all passionate about Rotorua and its future, but we are on a tight schedule tonight. So ultimately, this can't be a debating evening tonight. The idea is that we get an impression of who the candidates are, what their thoughts are when we walk out the door tonight. And of course, no matter how passionate we are about the subject, please, let's stay civil. I mean, fairly civil. Okay, I would like to give each candidate the opportunity to introduce themselves. To help them with time management, where's my timer here? To help them a little bit with time management, because that's not always easy. Miriam will tell them when there's 30 seconds left to go, and at 2 minutes she'll ring the bell. And it doesn't mean you have to finish mid-sentence, but please take that as a strong hint that it's time to wrap up. One thing I would like the audience to do, when the speaker comes up, just for a bit of encouragement and a boost and a bit more atmosphere, give them a quick applause so they have a bit of extra motivation when they come up here. Not that they need it, I'm sure, but okay. I'd like to ask the first candidate to come up. I've sort of randomly arranged this here, believe it or not. The first candidate I would like to come up to introduce themselves tonight is Reynold Macpherson.
Kia ora tātou. I was raised in Kaitaia in the far north in a multicultural family. We have Dutch ancestry in our family, plus of course British, Maori and Dalmatian. But we're still e whānau tahi tāta. We are together one family, and that's what I was raised to believe. It was very, very important. I trained as a teacher. I graduated in maths and management. I hold a number of postgraduate degrees and a PhD in organisational science. I've had leadership roles in military, in educational and research organisations. I was a professor of professional and organisation development at Auckland University before coming down here to act as Waireki's CEO. We settled $1 million debt and then made another profit of $1 million in our third year, which was reinvested back into the organisation. I started up Abu Dhabi University, followed by 3 ministerial commissions to fix large systems. I've had international consultancies, help with post-conflict reconstruction in Timor-Leste. So my point of difference with my colleagues is that I have expertise in fixing large organisations. I helped start Rotorua District Residents Ratepayers to restore democratic and effective decision-making at council. We also want to retire debt, boost business and jobs, and help the community to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Rotorua people feel increasingly powerless against the council's bad decisions, so what we're offering is that you take back control by electing RDRR candidates, and our point of difference is that we support deep change to council itself. So we promise to fix council and to fix Rotorua. Kia ora tātou.
Right, I would now like to give Tania the opportunity to introduce herself. Yay.
Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Tania Tapsell, and I am standing for Mayor to ensure a better future for Rotorua and a better Rotorua for all. I will do that through my 3 top priorities. Number 1, and this is important, a safe community. That is my top priority, and as your Mayor, I commit to investing $1.5 million into community safety initiatives for Rotorua. That shouldn't have to be the council's job, that should be government and police, but things are so bad that we can't do nothing. My second priority will be on stopping the spend. As part of this, I'll do a full review of council operations and, if necessary, a restructure to ensure that your rates are being used wisely and also ensuring better value for money. We do need to spend some money though, which is why my third priority will be around smart investment. I'm very excited to have committed to a Rotorua development strategy to ensure that we can enable housing and job opportunities, but also investing into destination marketing, because all anyone is hearing right now about Rotorua are the bad things that are happening down Fenton Street. But here in Rotorua, we have beautiful lakes, a beautiful forest, geothermal energy, so many great reasons why we should live here and why we should encourage other people to come and visit. So I am standing for a better Rotorua for all. I have spent the last 9 years on council. I have the most experience on council. So I give you the great advantage of having someone young with that energy and positive attitude, but also who knows council and how to get things done. I am very committed to this community. I live here with my husband and my 10-year-old stepson, and I'm very much looking forward to being your new mayor alongside Sandra Kaifong, who is backing me as the deputy mayor. So please vote for me, Tania Tapsell, your new mayor of Rotorua. Kia ora.
Thank you, Tania, and thank you to all the speakers so far to stick to the time so nicely. You don't have to use the lectern, by the way. Feel free to step outside if you feel constrained back here. Next person I would like to introduce themselves is Fletcher. Please, Fletcher.
Kia ora everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. And actually it's a genuine pleasure to be on this stage with a group of really good people, to be honest. Rotorua has a choice to make, and we have some good candidates to choose from. So tō to them for being here, but thank you all especially for being here tonight. There are some people up on the stage, however, who are talking about their experience when they should be talking about their culpability. Rotorua is at a stage where we need to make some big changes. And what I represent to you tonight is an opportunity to make those changes, to make that reset for a new refresh as the Mayor of Rotorua. And that's going to be essential. And what I will focus on, Reynold talked about his experience. I suppose what I wanted to highlight was my experience in Parliament, in opposition, and in government. And currently I own a consulting company as an economic advisor to several large companies here in New Zealand. And funnily enough, one of my roles with one of those companies is to consult on regional economic development. It's actually my role in Parliament as an Undersecretary, signed in as a Minister as well. And so what I'm saying to you tonight is that not only do we need a refresh, but we need a refresh that brings a level of political and business experience into the role so that we can hold the executive to account and make sure that your vision for our beautiful community is one that we can be proud of and one where we can move forward together, because I'm here to make sure that we will be all thriving together. So thank you all very much and have a good evening.
Thank you, Fletcher. Please, could Ben Sandford come up and give us an introduction?
Kia ora, I'm Ben Sandford. Thank you so much for coming along tonight. It's a real pleasure to see so many people at Green Drinks. And also I'd like to acknowledge my fellow mayoral candidates. And it's really great to see so many people here engaged in talking about the environment and also talking about the upcoming election too, because these are two key things that are happening in our society. We need to make sure that we're looking after the environment, and we need to make sure that we have people in local council that know how to do that and know how to look after our community. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised here in Rotorua. I went to Rotorua Boys High School. After I left school, I went to university thinking that I would become an environmental lawyer. So I studied law and I studied geography. When I got to studying the RMA though, that very much changed my perception of what environmental law was. It was very much about how big driveways were, if your neighbour's deck was too big or their chimney was too high, and it wasn't so much about saving the environment. So it's nice tonight to be able to circle back to start being able to talk about the environment again. And I feel as though Rotorua is uniquely placed in New Zealand to understand the importance of having an environment that we're going to look after. So we rely on the geothermal activity here, we rely on the lakes, we rely on the forests and the absolutely incredible natural beauty that we have here. And more than anywhere else I can think of in New Zealand, we rely on that for our jobs, for our well-being. We rely on the forest to play in and the lakes to swim in. And these are amazing assets that we have to ensure that we are looking after now to make sure that we're not leaving them in a worse place for future generations. We have to make sure as a council, in all the decisions that we're making, that we're looking after the environment and that we're leaving things better than we found. I'm really positive about Rotorua. I think we have absolutely incredible potential and that we're an amazing place. We just need to realise that potential, and I need you and the council to work together to realise that potential. So thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, second to last. Could I please ask Ananda Kalaadevi, come up, please.
Hello. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ananda, Kalaadevi Ananda, and I have lived in Rotorua for 27 years. I have a daughter, Tumaya Curtis, Ngāti Pikio, Ngāti Rongomai, and like all of you, we're all here for the same reason. We all care about Rotorua, we care about the lakes, we care about the mountains, the land, the environment, sustaining it, and we care about the people. And one more thing, all of us are here because we know that life is for others. We're thinking of the future. We're thinking about climate change and sustainability. Why? Because it's for others, not just for ourselves. It's not the paper you drop outside the car. It's the future. What will happen to generation after generation? So with that, we have this all in common. And when we look at Rotorua, we see that there are so many initiatives that are happening, beautiful initiatives, with organizations and businesses and trusts and individual people and volunteers. They're all over. As mayor, with the council, I will support all of these initiatives, and I will develop and enhance new initiatives. So together in Rotorua, we will have as close as we can to zero CO2 emissions. We will work on sustainability. Remember, what we need is we don't need the same old, same old. We need fresh eyes, fresh approach. Someone that will put Rotorua first. And together, we will create a new and whole Rotorua. Thank you.
Okay, and the last introducer, Rania Sears. Please welcome Rania.
Thank you, everybody. They've obviously saved the best for last. Who is Rania Sears? I was born in Dannevirke, raised here in Rotorua from a baby. I'm English, Scottish, Irish and Maori, so I've got all those strong bloods running through my veins. I am a widowed mother of 6 children and 5 grandchildren. Rotorua is our heart, our home, our passion, our place where we are bringing up our families. So the future, I'm not one to kind of sit on the fence and, wishy-washy complain. If I'm going to do something, I'm in there, I'm wholehearted, and I take full responsibility, full ownership for what I do. In terms of council and standing for mayor, I want to bring everything back to basics, and that starts with honesty, the values of transparency, transformation, honesty, integrity. I'd love the opportunity to go through all our policies with a fine-tooth comb, see where we can readjust, recenter and change things to make them more innovative and suit us. In terms of business, I have been in real estate for 6 years, started my own real estate company in Australia, built that from scratch. When COVID hit, I went through the processes of selling that, but it was very, very excellent, very awesome. I have a passion for housing, so that is one area where I will continue to be working with our iwi leaders and those within Rotorua to make changes there. And my time is up, but I'm looking forward to tonight's kaupapa about the environment and sustainability, etc. So I look forward to talking to you more. Thank you.
And thank you to all the candidates for giving it a chance to get to know them. Now, the Green Drinks team, together with Forest and Bird, has put together some questions that we would like to ask the candidates. As a matter of fact, we've put together lots of questions. So we had to whittle them down and fine-tune them to the last few questions that we really want to ask. And I hope that you will find those questions helpful and representative. I will ask the questions in a different order each time so that not everybody's up first, to keep it even. We do have 6 questions. However, depending on time, we may have to cut them back a bit. So hopefully your pet question wasn't at the end of the list. Miriam again will do her thing with the 30 seconds and the bell. So you've got 2 minutes again to answer each question. And for the first question, I'll read it out first. It'd be easier if I brought glasses. What steps do you think the council should be taking in the next term to respond to climate change for both mitigation and adaptation? How will you ensure any new policies always place the effects on the natural environment as a top priority? To start that round of that question, please welcome Fletcher Tabuteau.
Thank you for the question. Thank you again for the opportunity. So the Council has already signed up to the UN Climate Change Cities program in 2015. So I make a commitment to continue along those lines. They've also recently signed up to the Sustainable Living Strategy in 2016 and recently reviewed that in 2020. So that's about making sure that as a city we understand that our commitment to carbon zero and sustainability is a real thing. So I stand before you today to simply voice that commitment to you. I think as the Mayor, I want you to know that my commitment is about not standing still, about understanding that as we move forward as a city, and technology progresses and opportunities to invest in climate mitigation, sustainability, opportunities are there, and that is my commitment to you. There's a lot of detail in here that I wanted to touch on, but what I've been particularly passionate about is the conversations around power to X. So I see geothermal as an untouched potential, and I know that's the regional council. So the conversation is going to be a difficult one with regional council. I've done a lot of research, and I know we're going to have to get about $20 million from central government to tap in and give assurance that, 30 seconds already. I could go on all night. I suppose I'm still a politician. I suppose I should end it by briefly making that commitment to you again. The council has its mitigation strategies. I will continue to ensure that, but I suppose I should finish by saying and making the point again that central government has to be a partner with us in that journey that we must take. And so I provide that connection and that skill set to Rotorua, and we need that to move forward together. Thank you.
Would you like to answer that question on climate change?
Yes, please. Thank you. So there's two parts to this question, and I'll answer the last part first. So how will I ensure any new policies always place the effects on their natural environment as a top priority? First of all, there's a personal guarantee from me. I think we live in an absolutely incredible place, and we need to look after it, and we need to hand it on to the next generations in a better position than we found it. The second part of this is that we're actually really fortunate to have the Local Government Act here, in talking about wellbeing and in talking around the purpose of local government and how it needs to make those decisions. So having the environment as one of the wellbeings and having that as one of the considerations that council needs to consider when it's making decisions actually puts us in a really good place to make sure that the council is doing its job by considering the environment when it's making decisions in any new policies. On to the first part, around climate change, and we're all watching what's happening in Nelson with shock. And we are going to see more extreme events coming up in the future. And so we do need to act. We need mitigation and we need adaptation. Looking through all of the council documents, there's a lot on operations and there's a lot of really good information there. But the one thing that struck me was there's a lack of aspiration in there. There's a lot of, we will do the minimum standard required by the government, the minimum required of us to get to this level. So, and I understand that being aspirational is only one part, you also need to be operational, but I would actually like us to shoot for the stars, and if we don't get it, at least we'll land on the moon instead of shooting for the moon and only just getting off the ground. In terms of adaptation, there's a huge amount that we can do, whether it's stormwater, whether it's planting, whether it's bringing the natural environment into the city. I travel a lot for some of the work that I do and follow what's happening overseas around water-sensitive urban design, around sustainable drainage, around green infrastructure. And these are things that are working. We know they work. We just need to be able to implement them here. And we actually have that opportunity not to just support communities and uplift them, but make them much more environmentally friendly and make us more resilient.
Rania, would you like to give us your thoughts on climate change? Please welcome Rania again.
I can tell you honestly, it's not my strong point, but it is something that I'm looking into, and I want to educate myself because my children are becoming educated. And something I read which was interesting, a changing climate will always present a range of new challenges and opportunities. So I want to be able to work with those as they come. As I said in my speech, my opening speech, to be innovative in how we deal with those. I think in terms of Rotorua Lakes Council Action Plan, we just need to go through that and follow through and ensure that they are implementing everything that has been outlined. That's open on the website. And I know that if there's not very much I know, and that there's others around that don't know too much about sustainability, our environment, then we need to ensure that we're educating and providing that information for them. I'd love to in some way, because my adult children are now at that stage where they're into compost gardening and all the different things, worm gardens, looking at the geothermal, just to be able to educate them and to bring our communities together to work on different projects and to inspire our younger generation to get on board, because if we don't start making changes now, who knows where we're going to be in another 70 years or so.
Ananda, would you like to share your thoughts on climate change?
Thank you. So we need to counter and be proactive. All right, I have my list here. I'm going to go through them rather fast. By education and inspiring our communities, because it is about the people, right? It's about us working together and talking to each other and inspiring each other. Of course, we're going to lead the example by continuing taking care of our lakes, our waterways with the regional council, sustainable land usage, educating our children about the importance of guardianship, how to care and look after the land. And there are these little programs happening where children are visiting recycling centers. All of that makes a difference. And then they tell the parents and they talk about it with each other. Supporting the planting of trees, transforming the wetlands, reserves and public spaces. Planning for additional charging stations for when we have more and more electric vehicles. Investigate public transportation for the council fleet and also for the buses. In terms of electric, and now they're also looking, we have some hydrogen trucks working in the South Island. Facilitate using reserve land for food production and green spaces to enhance our city, not to build on. Encourage community-based food hubs so people are less reliant on packaged processed food in the stores. And finally, to inspire and support community gardens and neighborhood groups that will care for the people living around them in their suburbs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananda. And Reynold, what's your thoughts on climate change?
Thank you. Council's current Climate Action Plan 2021, and thank you to Councillor Fisher Wang and the officials you've been working with. It correctly aims to position Rotorua as a resilient community in a low-carbon economy. Its adaptation strategies are consistent with this policy. Its mitigation strategies are also consistent with the policy, with some exceptions. For example, encroaching on our dearly beloved green spaces is not consistent with that policy. There's also a tendency to use exaggerated growth projections instead of user demand, for example, when scaling public bus services. Next term, my view is that Council should offer an inclusive climate change policy development process that gives stakeholders authentic engagement, monitors international investments and outcomes, particularly the United States Inflation Reduction Plan. It's going to stimulate a tremendous degree of innovative thinking and research and so on. And we should be helping to implement national solutions that protect our natural environment. Finally, following from the recent advice from the IPCC, I would encourage more integrated national and local policy making that treats our emission trading scheme as part of a policy mix rather than as present, because it's at the moment New Zealand's primary policy response. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you. Tania, what's your thoughts on climate change?
Thank you very much. I was a bit too eager to get up before. So the protection and enhancement of our environment is one of my top priorities. And in the brochure that you've either received tonight or hopefully in your letterbox, I've already made the commitment that if you elect me as mayor, I will ensure that we introduce organic waste collection, better flood protection, and also upgrade the wastewater treatment plant to keep up with the growth in Rotorua, but also importantly protect our lakes. So these are three very practical things that I will focus on your mayor within that, or as your mayor within that first term. I want to acknowledge as well Councillor Fisher Wang, who has done an excellent job leading the climate change portfolio, and the staff in the room that have helped. At council, I led the Sustainable Living Strategy, where we made great changes that actually brought environmental and economic benefits, like the curbside waste collection, changing all of our streetlights to LED, and converting the council building to geothermal energy. Now, a lot of these actually help to save ratepayers money too. So I'm very keen to continue supporting these practical initiatives that are good for the environment and actually good for our pockets as ratepayers too. In terms of the question on how we can actually ensure that any new policies do place some sort of priority on the environment, as your new mayor, I would also like to see that council procurement policies have a higher weighting towards tenders that do show that they will have environmentally friendly or sustainable practices. Now, this is very important. I also want to include in there some sort of social weighting in the procurement to ensure that those that we do give contracts to are locals or using local resources as well. So that's a practical way that we can do that. I've been a strong advocate for climate change and environmental action on council. When I first came into council and talked about climate change, a lot of people kind of looked at me going, what are you talking about? Fortunately, we now have the Climate Change Action Plan, which I'm a strong supporter of, and I will continue to support environmental initiatives as your new mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Gana. That was the first round of questions. Thank you again to all the speakers for so magnificently sticking to the time. The next question is all about road transport, something dear to my heart. Now, road transport is responsible for most of Rotorua's emissions. What will you push for in terms of transport policy in council, particularly with regard to emissions reductions? I would like to start with Ben this time.
So this is a good question. What are we going to do about road emissions and transport in Rotorua? This is, to me, is all about transport options, and we need to make sure that options are available to people. If people don't have options, they're going to continue to use the same modes of transport that they are at the moment. So, there are a number of things that we can do. I grew up in a time where everyone was riding to school or walking to school. I know parents in this community that won't let their kids ride or walk to school because they don't feel like it's safe for them to cross the road or because the footpaths aren't wide enough. So the council is widening some footpaths, but we also need to encourage that so then you're getting parents not having to drop their kids off at school. We also need to not just widen footpaths, we also need to increase our bike infrastructure. Now, I know there's a lot of pushback around cycle lanes, and some of them haven't been done in an optimal way in the past. But think about all the mountain bikers that are mountain biking in the forest every weekend. They're all driving to the forest to get there in the first place. They're staying in accommodation here, driving to the forest to go mountain biking. Why can we not facilitate, whether it's cycling infrastructure or public transport for them to get from where they are to the forest? So there's simple things that we can do. We can also encourage the adoption of electronic vehicles. We can work with the regional council on public transport, but there's a lot of things that we can do to support our local communities to build them up, make them more resilient, and give them transport options that work for them, that are low cost, whether it's walking, riding, taking public transport, and we have the power to do that.
Fletcher, what's your thoughts on road transport?
So I see this in two parts. So I acknowledge the comments from Ben. You think a lot about access and safety in terms of encouraging families and people in our community to get out and walk again, to get back on their bikes. I would, by the way, remove that column through the city centre, that cycleway through the city centre. So there's that local focus. So it's about accessibility and the council doing its part to make sure that locals have access and are incentivised in that way to use alternative transports. That also comes back to mechanisms around charging stations for electric vehicles and that kind of thing as we move to those alternative energy alternatives. The second part to my contribution tonight is about the wider roading strategy. So I'm a big advocate for the realignment and the widening of the road from Rotorua to Hamilton, so that it's economically motivated to incentivise haulage and businesses to place themselves here in Rotorua. But part of that is also about a rail network. And so you have cheaper, more cost-effective, quicker trips. I've been doing a lot of work in the hydrogen space. So there's large vehicle transport alternatives that use hydrogen, which is truck haulage, which is already out there. So there are companies investing in hydrogen in their trucks today. So that's part of that wider, broader strategy around the bigger roading strategy here in Rotorua. And for me, the primary thought process behind that was economic growth. But actually, if you do it smart and you do it sustainability and make a commitment to that, which I do to you tonight, it can be done in an environmental way such that we improve our carbon emissions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, transport and emissions. Rania, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts.
Be nice to have our roads fixed for starters. Gosh, some of the potholes and everything that around my area in particular. But in terms of the emissions reduction, transport is one of our largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions and is responsible for 17% of New Zealand's emissions. So to continue the path of promoting and encouraging the use of our walkways, our cycling, I think living in Australia and seeing what they have, like they've got the wide roadways for parking, but they don't have the blessing, I guess, of having what we have here in terms of our cycleways, our walkways. Everything's just so like crushed and squashed in. So I think encouraging our children and even our generation, because it also hits the health part of our lives, to get out and utilise that. And I hear stories of my grandparents and my mother. They used to ride horses to school, and it's like, well, you know, back in the day they could get on a horse. Why can't we get on a bike? And why can't we, you know, be teaching our children? They're too used to having everything handed to them, and jump in the car will drop you off. But I think in terms of COVID and what's been happening there, just quite by accident, we've probably had a large reduction and the use of petrol, our vehicles, because everybody's had also the option of working from home. So looking at maybe other strategies. Do we need to travel as much? The price increase of petrol has gone up so high that hopefully might put a few people off and look at other alternatives of transport. But like Ben and Fletcher said, having that variety of transport readily available and for good use for our communities.
Roads and emissions. Reynold, what would you do about it?
Thank you. Look, my preliminary review of the policies of this country led me to support the emission reduction plan from the Ministry of Environment. It recommends transport targets intended to achieve a 41% reduction in transport emissions by 2035 compared to 2019 levels. I also support the government's plan announced in January last year, along with 50 million, to encourage zero emissions public transport buses from 2025 and to have the entire public transport bus fleet decarbonised by 2035. Finally, the government announced just last week, 8 days ago, a new sustainable public transport framework. It allows councils to own buses and customise them to meet their community's needs. These are great opportunities. So I would push hard for policy research to evaluate and project demand and plan network efficiencies prior to elected members of councils making long-term public investment decisions. In sum, I imagine a far more responsive and efficient local system of EV buses of different sizes and a hydrogen-fuelled heavy transport system. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Reynold. Tania, what's your thoughts on road transport?
Thank you very
very much. So transportation in Rotorua actually accounts for 21% of emissions in Rotorua. So many aspects of transport, like the city ride buses, are actually the responsibility of Bay of Plenty Regional Council. However, we have seen that their focus and majority of their funding often goes to the bigger city centre of Tauranga. So as Mayor, I will be a strong voice for us here in Rotorua and support a fair share of funding and that focus on Rotorua and, importantly, community engagement for our public transport needs. I need to acknowledge Phil Thomas in the room, who's the Lakes Community Board Chair, represents Rotorua on that Bay of Plenty Public Transport Committee, and he is advocating all the time that Rotorua not only needs more funding, but actually needs to have a say in community engagement. Because how many of us knew that the public bus transport routes changed recently? I can almost guarantee not many. So, but after the fact, so we need to make sure that Rotorua is being looked after in terms of public transport. Council also needs to ensure that our infrastructure, like those bus stops, are fit for purpose, but I do support free bus fares for local students. This is to encourage good behaviours in them young, so that hopefully when they then go on to study and to work, they continue to use public transport. I'm also a big fan of cycling education programs like the bikes in schools. It's amazing. Within 2 days, these students would not know how to bike, and all of a sudden they're riding around on bikes. We need to support that and also support safer cycleways for them to get from their home to school as well. I've committed to undertake a Rotorua development strategy to enable those housing, commercial, industrial, but ensuring that public transport and also cycling and pedestrian access ways are a part of this is also really important. Finally, for a transport policy in council, a no-brainer is switching to electric vehicles. In the past, I tried to do this, it wasn't feasible then, but now with the extra charge and the discounts on electric vehicles, I hope it will be, and I hope as your Mayor, we'll bring in more electric vehicles to our fleet.
And Ananda, your turn.
So it's not just about options in terms of transport. We know that because we see empty buses. It's about also changing thinking of the people, that they would understand, oh, I have time, I can take my bike, I can ride it into town. So how do we promote and inspire? This is what we need to do. Promote and inspire the use of buses and cycling routes to reduce the use of private vehicle. Also, we need to create a strategy to replace the council fleet. I would really be excited for hydrogen cars, hydrogen hybrid cars, electric cars, including our public transportation fleet, as was mentioned. I would champion the growth of more local markets and local grown produce, because by doing that, we eliminate the drivers, the truckers, CO2. We need to have local markets, food markets. As a council, we should research and develop all alternative fuel and energy for the transportation sector. Imagine, and it's possible, and it's happening, imagine our logging trucks being electric or hydrogen. Imagine, these are existing ideas that would be a complete game changer for Rotorua. Thank you.
Stay there. Stay there. You're up for the next question.
Oh.
Since you're on a roll, you might as well.
Am I on a roll?
Going.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just grab.
Okay, waste minimization.
Waste minimization. So I'll read out the question for a minute. What do you think should be done to put into practice reduce and reuse ahead of recycling in Rotorua? What council incentives should there be for individuals and organizations to reduce waste? Ananda.
Yes, thank you. Waste minimization. recycling. My goodness, if we recycled everything, we'd be doing a great job. And we're doing it in Rotorua. We have many organizations, don't we, that reuse, reduce and recycle. So council incentives for individual and organizations. That's what we need to reduce and reuse. Support community food gardens. Again, to eliminate the drivers, trucks, reduce plastic, jars and packaging. And there are simple things that individuals can do to protect the earth. Encourage the knowledge and responsibility of our waste footprint by choosing products when we go in the supermarket that don't have plastic or have paper over plastic. And supporting, and I know we have this happening at Tania, supporting the repurposing of electronic equipment. And this is a big thing because they're fixing it and they're reusing it, and that's a direction that we need to continue to go on. This is a man's suit. I'm reusing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananda. And sorry for setting you up for a double. I really did these names totally randomly.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Rania. What's your thoughts on waste minimisation?
Okay, emissions from solid waste constitute the majority of waste emissions, mainly from organic matter, such as kitchen and garden scraps that break down to the landfill to produce potent methane emissions. Now, reducing waste emissions is an easy first step to take as individuals, families, households, businesses, communities, schools, and as a council. I come back to gardening as it's something as a family we are exploring along with my children and enjoying that time together and the learning of it. A very small part in the overall minimisation of waste, but a very powerful example of reduce and reuse. Putting into practice reduce, reuse, well before recycling is really going to take a constant reminding, educating and empowering our communities to actually do this. We cannot take for granted that people within our communities think about such things. So how do we get innovative and make this something households and communities actually think about and actually want to partake in?
Tania, what do you think Rotorua can do about waste minimisation?
I'll tell you what the council can do about it. So because of the emissions trading reforms announced in June 2020, there will continue to be a steep increase in landfill levies and charges. It was currently about $30, that will go up to $60. So you put in that extra cost on people to send waste to landfill, as well as the fact that 56% of that waste going to landfill is actually organic, and it makes a lot of sense to introduce organic waste collection, which is why as Mayor I have also committed to doing that and hope that I can bring that decision to the council table in March of next year. So the proposal could be a weekly food and organic waste collection in a green bin that's collected fortnightly, as well as, in a green bin that's connected weekly, because it is food waste, as well as your fortnightly red bin collection, blue glass bins, and your yellow bin recycling can remain the same. Now, if we introduce organic waste collection, this is why I'm so passionate about it, we expect to divert 8,000 tonnes of waste a year going into the landfill. So the savings from diverting that waste to the landfill actually makes this proposal more viable than keeping up with what we've currently got. And people are always shocked when I tell them that our landfill is full, it's capped. Any waste that we make here in Rotorua is going into someone else's backyard. So this is a serious issue that we not only as a community, but as households need to start addressing. So the benefits of this could be a circular economy, climate change mitigation, and actually a really exciting opportunity to create a new sustainable industry and jobs within Rotorua. So organisations and businesses could also have the opportunity to access this organic waste collection. And what I'm really passionate about is extending this to the food waste from businesses. You think of all of our restaurants and cafes, and also those major events that we have here in Rotorua. Now imagine how great that's going to be for Rotorua, for our environment, and actually for the world. Save the planet.
Thanks, Tania. Well, as Tania pointed out, Fletcher, what can the council do for waste minimisation?
I'd actually like to tautoko the words that Tania spoke about the green recycling. I think there's one step before that, though. For the last year, while consulting, I've had some time on my hands, and I've been looking at what I can do to utilise and minimise my waste at home. And I think if we make a commitment as a council and make sure the government's helping us to do that, then the first step is about education and incentivising people to look after their own food waste. And I think if we can do both of those things, we have an amazing opportunity to lower our own costs and the resulting problems around waste. In terms of reduce and reuse, I'm a big sustainability advocate, and I'm a proponent and a fan of the circular economy. And I believe very much in the work that central government's doing now around incentivising business and organisations to design from the start of the life of a product such that they are minimising their impact on the environment. In terms of recycling, in 2019 in Rotorua, I was part of a funding initiative to help EcoGas install a plant there, which would actually, they've proven, would remove more than 300,000 tonnes of waste and lethal gases into our environment. So very much committed to the reuse, and but also very much committed to the need to make sure that the waste that we are producing is being recycled, and in terms of eco-gas as an example of what we can do, being turned into energy, clean green energy that we can use in our power lines. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Fletcher. And Ben, your thoughts?
Thank you. So, as Tania pointed out, the council already has what they're considering at the moment, the waste management and minimisation plan for 2022 through to 2028. And I would really encourage you to read it, because it's actually a really good document, and I'd like to thank council for the work that you've done on this, because there's a lot in there, and there's a lot of really good plans and initiatives that we can take forward as a community. So within that, it talks about extension of curbside collection for organic waste, so for food and garden waste, 100% support that. And also making that, like we've already heard, a circular economy where we have the composting of that done locally, so we're not also shipping that out, so we're doing that locally and reducing our waste in that way as well. And within that plan, there's also talk about expanding curbside collection to the rural communities that don't already have it. And that's also important, so we can add their recycling to the recycling that we're already doing. So that's something that is before council, that will work its way through council, that I 100% support. But the other part here is around information and education and advocacy. And I think we sometimes think the council is responsible for everything when it's actually not. What the council can do, though, is it can educate and it can advocate. And here, information is the key, and that's one of the reasons why I would direct you to that report, because it's actually got some really interesting information about what's happening in the recycling space, where our waste is going, how much waste we're generating. But if we don't know what we need to fix, then we won't fix it. So the council needs to play a really important role in educating the community about what our outputs are and what the end direction and goal is. And once we have that, then we can rally as a community to support those initiatives and make sure that we are reducing our waste in line with the plan. Thanks.
Reynold, your thoughts?
I'm pleased to be able to support most of the arguments that you've heard. From my study of what's going on at the moment, it's true that council should reduce the amount of waste and repurpose waste because they make quicker contributions to the reduction of greenhouse gases than recycling. Recycling, as many of you know, adds an expensive additional remanufacturing loop, and it takes extra time, and we don't have extra time. Another helpful strategy that's been stressed is the need to encourage individuals and organisations to move from a linear economy, and that's normally defined as taking, making, disposing approach with energy from finite resources, to a circular economy, which is normally defined as making, using, and then having a return cycle with energy from renewable sources. A key difference. So I agree with the previous speakers on this. As for individuals, I think council really should, as Ben stressed, use ethical mass persuasion techniques that use credible authority, a logic and emotion to encourage everyone in our community to adopt more healthy and more environmentally responsible behaviours. Think, for example, of the deep and beneficial outcomes achieved by changing public attitudes to smoking. It takes time, but the value gain can be enormous. Finally, regarding organisations, council really should encourage them to save money through more efficient use of raw materials, changing packaging and using fresh technologies, through cutting their waste disposal costs and through cheaper and simpler compliance with environmental legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Reynold. And we'll move on to the next question. Probably somebody that's dear to the heart of many of us, and something that with the council is indeed quite involved in. It's about three waters. And the question is simply, what is your position on the Three Waters reform program? But they've put in here, please justify your answer. And I'd like to start it with Rania.
Great, the one I didn't want to start.
Thank you. No, that's all right. I want to be very, very careful in how I address the three waters, and I'm probably better to just stay silent and sit down. I have done a lot of reading. I have done a lot of looking into this. My position, and I'll be brave and I'll just say I'm not for our three waters, our wastewater, stormwater and drinking water. One, because and if this was a debate it would be fun. I just want to look into that whole thing a lot further, and I don't want it to ever reach a place where the ratepayers just coincidentally and just so happen to end up paying more than what we're paying now for our waters. And I don't think there is a true ownership of those waters. That's my take on this. I have a lot to say, but I'm probably best to keep my mouth shut and give it to the next person.
Thank you, Ran. And the next person is Ananda.
The Rotorua Council and the residents are clearly against the Three Waters Reform Bill. This is clear. The government proposed legislation, their proposed legislation will control the drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. So they are saying, yes, that we own it, but they will control it. We need proper consultation, less rush and decision making, because this decision is going to affect our future children, grandchildren. And so it's a decision that they'll have to live with, and therefore we have to be very careful and go slowly. In my view, we will take care of our water better. If there is co-governance in the water, we can't be assured what will be put in it. We can't be assured how much we can use. But with us keeping it within our community, we will have more of a say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananda. Reynold, what's your thoughts on Three Waters?
I can be quite blunt about this. I oppose the Three Waters reform. It's resented by almost all of our members, that's the RDRR members, especially by rural members who have purchased their own freshwater infrastructure. 10% compensation for ratepayer funded infrastructure is regarded by many as theft. Now, the proposal to set up 4 massive bureaucracies to take over the assets, the debt and management of Three Waters with co-governance is, in my view, wasteful and will probably prove dysfunctional because of its complexity. There are other proven alternative models available. Take, for example, Wakakutahi, NZTA. It maintains and develops our national roading network. It works within a budget and it centrally, the financing is managed centrally. Now, it negotiates and customises district by district the maintenance and development of roading, local roading systems. That response appears to me to be far more sophisticated, far more responsive, and far less bureaucratic method of being organised, with productivity and local accountability in mind. It will also bring a bigger bang for the buck. In my professional view, we do not need these 4 large entities at super-regional level to manage our Three Waters. After our tractor-led transport, Council voted 10-1 against supporting Three Waters. That was quite unexpected, but my view is now we should join over 30 councils now that have formed the Communities for Local Democracy group opposing Three Waters. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Reynold. Some strong thoughts. Tania, what's your thoughts?
Thank you. So I am strongly against the Three Waters. Generations of Rotorua ratepayers have paid for our water assets and we should keep them. I'm against this because our drinking water is currently of an excellent standard, which means we will be paying for the wider region all the way to Taranaki to come up to scratch with theirs. If we lose that local decision making, we also lose the ability to decide how much that will cost. So when we are already at a high level in Rotorua, and I am grateful for that, how can we expect that we will be better off financially when helping smaller councils or other rural councils to come up to scratch with their waters? I'm also really concerned about losing that local decision making, because when we look at what happened with the amalgamation of our tertiary education system, when we looked at what happened with the amalgamation of our district health boards, how can we expect it to be any better if we are going to amalgamate the Three Waters? So as your mayor, I will be a strong voice to ensure fairness, to ensure transparency, and to ensure that we keep those local decision making here in Rotorua with the Rotorua Lakes Council. I strongly oppose the Three Waters that this government is trying to push through. And it's really important, not only for us, but all of those iwi. So people go on about, oh, but you're going to have iwi representation with co-governance. You think it's bad enough for our local communities to lose their voice? Imagine how many different iwi there are on their entity B to only have a couple of representatives on there. Here in Rotorua, we are very unique. We have multiple assets, whether it's our drinking water or our wastewater, that are actually sitting on Māori-owned land. So they lose out as well. We need that fairness, transparency, and keeping local decision making to ensure it's better for everyone in Rotorua.
Thank you, Tania. Fletcher, your thoughts?
I knew these debates wouldn't be that much fun because everyone agrees on everything already. I'm completely opposed to the government's approach to Three Waters, and I fundamentally stand behind that. And everyone's kind of touched on each point, but let me summarise. We will no longer own those assets, and the problem with that is we no longer get to make the choices on investment in infrastructure in our community going into the future. So Entity B also includes Tauranga and Hamilton. Both have completely underinvested in their water infrastructure for decades, and they're struggling to keep up with their population rises as it is. So as we move as a community into this Entity B, I guarantee you we will be subsidising the water upgrade or the infrastructure upgrade of Tauranga and Hamilton as we move forward. Never mind, as Reynold mentioned, the sheer size of the bureaucracy and the inefficiencies of that being moved up into this unaccountable entity that the government's creating. The cost of that will be massive. There will be no cost savings. So fundamentally, I have opposed this from the start because ratepayers will pay more for their water and we will have no say on the future investment on water infrastructure here in our communities. Forget Rotorua, what about Rotorua and our other rural communities who are already struggling to have a voice as to where money should be invested on infrastructure? I just want to finish on a quote from the Auditor General because he spoke quite eloquently to Parliament just the other day. He said says the government legislation for Three Waters reform removes important checks and balances, allowing the new water entities to operate without proper accountability. There can be no accountability from Parliament because it's not a Crown entity, and there will be no accountability from ratepayers because it will be not owned by council either. So I'm completely opposed. Thank you very much.